crystal chandelier cast fractured rainbows across the mahogany table as Maya Rodriguez balanced 3 steaming plates on her left arm, her right hand steadying the fourth. The Grand View Executive Club's main dining room hummed with the low murmur of power lunches and million-dollar deals, but all Maya could hear was the thundering of her own heartbeat. Table 7 had been nothing but trouble since the moment she'd approached with water glasses 20 minutes ago. "Excuse me, miss." The voice cut through her concentration like a blade. Maya looked up to see Marcus Wellington III, CEO of Wellington Financial Holdings, snapping his manicured fingers at her with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been told no. His steel-gray eyes held the cold calculation of a man who measured human worth and quarterly earnings, and right now, Maya fell far short of his standards. "Yes, sir?" Maya's voice carried the practiced patience of someone who had waited tables through community college, through her mother's chemotherapy treatments, through every small humiliation that life had served her on a silver platter. Her grandmother's saint medallion, worn smooth by decades of worried fingers, pressed against her collarbone beneath her crisp white uniform shirt. "This salmon is overcooked," Marcus declared, though he had barely touched the perfectly pink fillet. His lunch companions, 2 younger executives whose nervous energy suggested they were desperate to impress their superior, exchanged glances. "And the wine you recommended is absolutely dreadful. I specifically asked for something with complexity, not this swill that tastes like it came from a gas station." Maya's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had worked at the Grandview for 3 years, had studied their wine list with the dedication of a scholar, had even taken evening classes in hospitality management at the local community college. The Chateau Margaux 2015 she had recommended was a $400 bottle, and she knew it was exceptional because she had tasted it during the staff training session last month, a single, precious sip that had transported her to the rolling hills of Bordeaux she had only seen in photographs. "I apologize, sir. Would you prefer I speak with the chef about preparing a new salmon? And perhaps I could suggest an alternative wine?" She kept her voice level, professional, even as she noticed how Marcus's companions shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. She had learned long ago that rising to bait only gave people like Marcus more ammunition. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth that held no warmth. "You know what I think. I think you recommended the most expensive wine on the menu, hoping to pad your tip. I think you're trying to take advantage of hard-working business people who actually contribute something meaningful to society." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She thought of her acceptance letter to law school, folded carefully in her wallet next to her student loan documents and a picture of her late mother. She thought of the scholarship essay she had written about using education to bridge the gap between the service industry and professional world, about how every interaction was an opportunity to learn about human nature and business dynamics. "Sir, I recommended that wine because it pairs beautifully with the salmon preparation, and because you mentioned you enjoyed full-bodied reds with earthy undertones. I would never—" "Don't lecture me about wine, little girl." Marcus's voice rose just enough to draw attention from neighboring tables. "I was drinking wine worth more than your monthly salary when you were still in diapers. And frankly, I'm tired of entitled service workers who think they're too good for their jobs." Maya's grip tightened on the plates, her knuckles white beneath her brown skin. She thought of her grandmother. "I'll get the manager," Maya said quietly, turning to leave before she said something that would cost her the job she needed to pay for her LSAT prep course. "Running away already?" Marcus called after her, his voice dripping with disdain. "That's exactly what I'd expect from someone with no real work ethic. You people always look for the easy way out instead of taking responsibility for your mistakes." Maya froze. Those 3 words, "you people," hung in the air like poison gas. She turned slowly, her dark eyes meeting Marcus's pale ones across the space between their worlds. The Grandview's other diners had fallen silent, sensing the shift in atmosphere like animals before a storm. "Mr. Wellington," Maya said, her voice steady but carrying an undertone that made his lunch companions straighten in their chairs. "I have worked here for 3 years without a single complaint. I am completing my degree while working to support myself and my grandmother. I recommended that wine because I know this menu, I know wine, and I know hospitality. But what I don't know is why you feel the need to humiliate someone who is trying her best to provide you with excellent service." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face flushed red not with shame, but with rage at being challenged by someone he considered beneath his notice. His lunch companions looked like they wanted to disappear into their leather upholstery. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "I don't care about your sob story or your grades. You're a waitress. That's all you are, and that's all you'll ever be. Know your place." Maya felt something break inside her chest, not her spirit, but her willingness to accept cruelty in silence. She had spent years perfecting the art of invisible service, of anticipating needs before they were spoken, of making wealthy diners feel comfortable and important. But in this moment, standing in the reflected light of crystal and chrome, she realized that some prices were too high to pay.
"My place," Maya said, her voice carrying across the hushed dining room, "is wherever I choose to put myself. And right now, I choose to stand here with my head held high, doing honest work with integrity and respect for every person I serve. I'm sorry you can't say the same." The words landed like a slap across Marcus's face. For a moment, he seemed too stunned to respond, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Then his expression twisted into something ugly, something that revealed the rot beneath his expensive suit and polished exterior. But before Marcus could unleash whatever venom he had prepared, the dining room's atmosphere shifted again. Every head turned toward the entrance, where a woman in her mid-50s stood, surveying the scene with sharp, intelligent eyes. Elizabeth View-Chen, founder and CEO of Grandview Hospitality Group, had arrived for her monthly inspection a day early. The tension in the air thickened as Elizabeth's gaze moved from Maya's composed face to Marcus's flushed one, taking in the tableau with the practiced eye of someone who had built an empire on understanding human nature. Her presence seemed to fill the room, commanding attention without effort, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light like a crown. Marcus straightened, suddenly aware that his private moment of cruelty had become a public spectacle. But the damage was done, the words spoken, and the character revealed. And Elizabeth View-Chen had seen it all. "Mija," Elena would call softly from her bedroom, her voice carrying the music of Mexico City even after 47 years in California. "You don't have to baby me. I raised 3 children and 6 grandchildren. I can sort my own pills." But Maya would continue her careful ritual because she knew that Elena's pride was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. The woman who had cleaned office buildings until her knees gave out, who had sent money home to Michoacán while raising Maya after her mother's death, deserved to be cared for with the same fierce dedication she had shown her family. Maya's reflection in the bathroom mirror told the story of a woman caught between worlds. Her mother's Mexican features were softened by her father's lighter skin, creating a face that belonged fully to neither heritage, but carried the beauty of both. She would study herself as she applied minimal makeup. She couldn't afford much, and the Grandview's dress code preferred understated elegance anyway. But in her dark eyes, she could see the intelligence that had earned her a full scholarship to UC Berkeley, and the determination that had carried her through every challenge life had thrown at her. She had learned to read in any lighting, to concentrate despite the conversations and phone calls of other passengers, to make every moment count toward the future she was building 1 credit hour at a time. Other passengers saw just another young woman in a service uniform, but Maya carried dreams that stretched far beyond their assumptions. She would become a lawyer, she had decided, specializing in employment law and workers' rights. She would use her education to protect people like Elena, like herself, like every hard-working person who had been dismissed or diminished because they wore uniforms instead of suits. Maya moved through the club's familiar opulent spaces with practiced efficiency. She moved through these spaces like a ghost, efficient and nearly invisible, providing impeccable service while observing the power dynamics that played out over million-dollar deals and strategic partnerships. Her supervisor, Janet Martinez, had become more than a boss over the years. She was a mentor who understood the hunger in Maya's eyes because she had felt it herself. Janet had worked her way up from server to assistant manager through 22 years of dedication to excellence, and she saw in Maya the intelligence and work ethic that could take her even further. "You see everything," Janet had told her during her first year as they polished stemware after a particularly busy shift. "That's your gift and your curse. You see how they treat each other, how they make decisions, how power really works. Most people in service learn to look away because it's safer. But you watch, you learn, and you remember. That's going to serve you well when you have your law degree." Maya's co-workers at the Grandview were a diverse group of dreamers and survivors. There was Carlos, the sommelier, who had studied wine in France before his visa expired, forcing him to return to California where his credentials weren't recognized. He treated every wine service like performance art, educating Maya about terroir and vintage while they worked side by side. Maria, the head server, was supporting 3 children and her mother while studying nursing at night. And James, barely 21, sent most of his paycheck to his family in the Philippines while saving for culinary school. They formed an unlikely family, bonded by shared exhaustion and mutual respect. They covered for each other during emergencies, celebrated small victories together, and provided emotional support when the weight of their double lives became too heavy to bear alone. Maya had learned as much about loyalty and leadership from her coworkers as she had from any business textbook. The members of the Grandview Executive Club fell into several distinct categories, and Maya had studied them all with the attention of an anthropologist. There were the self-made entrepreneurs who treated staff with kindness born from remembering their own humble beginnings. There were the inherited wealthy, who either displayed noblesse oblige or entitled cruelty, depending on their character.
Maya had served Marcus dozens of times over the past year, and each interaction had revealed more of his character. He was the type who would change his order 3 times, demand modifications that stressed the kitchen, and find fault with perfectly prepared dishes. He spoke to servers as if they were furniture that had developed the inconvenient ability to think and respond. Other members would at least acknowledge Maya's humanity with a nod or a thank you, but Marcus seemed to view basic courtesy as beneath his station. What troubled Maya most about Marcus wasn't his rudeness. She had dealt with difficult customers before. It was his deliberate cruelty, the way he seemed to take pleasure in making others feel small. She had watched him berate a busboy for refilling his water glass without being asked, had heard him criticize the appearance of servers to their faces, had seen him leave insultingly small tips on large bills as a form of punishment for imagined slights. During her lunch breaks, Maya would sit in the staff room and work on her law school applications. She would draft and redraft her personal statement, trying to capture in words the fire that burned in her chest when she witnessed injustice. She wrote about the intersection of class and dignity, about the economic systems that allowed some people to treat others as disposable, about her desire to use the law as a tool for protecting the vulnerable. Her professors at community college had encouraged her to apply to the most prestigious law schools in the country. Her grades and test scores opened doors that had been locked to previous generations of her family. But the application fees alone represented weeks of grocery money, and the fear of accumulating more debt sometimes kept Maya awake at night, staring at the ceiling while Elena's breathing provided a rhythmic soundtrack to her anxiety. The scholarship she had received to complete her undergraduate degree was need-based, requiring Maya to document every aspect of her financial situation in excruciating detail. She had learned to navigate financial aid offices with the skill of a diplomat, to appeal decisions with persistence and grace, to find creative ways to stretch every dollar. These skills would serve her well in law school, but sometimes Maya wondered if she would ever reach a point where money wasn't a constant source of stress.
Elena never complained about their circumstances, but Maya knew the sacrifices her grandmother made daily. She would pretend she wasn't hungry so Maya could have larger portions. She would wear the same 3 dresses in rotation rather than ask for money for new clothes. She would suffer through pain rather than request expensive medications that might ease her arthritis. She saw it all, understood the silent language of sacrifice that had defined their relationship since her mother's death. The weight of responsibility sat on Maya's shoulders like a lead blanket. She was not just pursuing an education for herself, she was carrying the dreams of every woman in her family who had been denied the opportunity to reach for something higher. Her mother had wanted to be a teacher before she became pregnant at 19. Elena had dreamed of opening a small restaurant before circumstances forced her into a lifetime of cleaning other people's offices. Maya would not let their sacrifices be in vain. Some evenings, after particularly difficult shifts at the Grandview, Maya would sit on the fire escape outside their apartment and look west toward the lights of San Francisco. She would imagine herself in a courtroom arguing a case that would set precedent for workers' rights. She would picture herself in a law office of her own, taking cases for people who couldn't afford traditional representation. She would dream of a future where she could provide Elena with the comfortable retirement she deserved. But dreams were fragile things in a world that seemed designed to crush them. Maya had learned to protect her ambitions like precious gems, revealing them only to those who had earned her trust. Too many people were eager to explain why her goals were unrealistic, why someone from her background should be grateful for what she had rather than reaching for something better. Maya had stopped listening to those voices years ago, but she had never stopped hearing them. The morning of the incident with Marcus Wellington III had started like any other. Maya had prepared Elena's medication, studied contract law during her commute, and arrived at the Grandview Executive Club with the quiet determination that characterized all her endeavors. She had no way of knowing that this would be the day when her 2 worlds would collide with explosive force, when the careful balance she had maintained between dignity and necessity would finally reach its breaking point. As she had approached Table 7 with water glasses and menus, Maya had sensed the tension that surrounded Marcus like a toxic cloud. His lunch companions were clearly nervous, their body language suggesting that this was an important meeting that could make or break their careers. Maya had done what she always did in such situations. She became invisible, efficient, professional, anticipating needs before they were expressed and staying out of the way while powerful men made decisions that would affect thousands of people. But invisibility, Maya had learned, was both a survival strategy and a trap. It protected her from unwanted attention, but it also allowed people like Marcus to forget that she was human, that she had feelings and dreams and dignity that deserved respect. And on this particular day, Marcus Wellington III would learn that some people refuse to remain invisible forever. The aftermath of Maya's quiet confrontation rippled through the Grandview Executive Club like stones dropped in still water. Elizabeth View-Chen stood in the dining room's entrance, her presence commanding attention without effort, her steel-gray eyes taking in every detail of the scene before her. The silence stretched taut as a wire, broken only by the soft clink of silverware as other diners pretended to focus on their meals while straining to catch every word of the drama unfolding at Table 7.
Marcus Wellington III's face had progressed from red to purple, his perfectly knotted tie suddenly seeming too tight around his thick neck. His lunch companions, David Kim and Sarah Chen, both vice presidents at Wellington Financial Holdings, sat frozen in their chairs like deer caught in headlights. They had witnessed their CEO's transformation from polished executive to common bully, and now they found themselves unwilling participants in what was clearly becoming a career-defining moment. "Ms. Rodriguez," Elizabeth's voice cut through the tension with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "Please step away from Table 7 for a moment. I'd like to have a word with our guests."
Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she moved with the fluid grace that 3 years at the Grandview had ingrained in her muscle memory. She set the disputed plates on a nearby service station, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she retreated toward the kitchen, she caught glimpses of other servers watching from doorways and corners, their expressions ranging from sympathy to admiration to barely concealed fear. Elizabeth approached Cable 7 with the measured stride of a general surveying a battlefield. At 54, she commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation, though she was certainly capable of both. She had built Grandview Hospitality Group from a single restaurant into an empire of luxury establishments across California, and she had done it by understanding that true hospitality required genuine respect for every person who walked through her doors, staff and guests alike. "Ms. Rodriguez?" Elizabeth's voice carried just enough warmth to be polite and just enough steel to convey seriousness. "As the owner of this establishment, I'm deeply concerned about what transpired here." Marcus straightened in his chair, clearly attempting to regain his composure and assert his authority. "Elizabeth, I'm glad you're here. I was just about to request a different server. This young woman has been extremely unprofessional, argumentative, and, frankly, I don't think she understands the caliber of clientele you serve here." Elizabeth's eyebrow arched slightly, a gesture that her employees had learned to recognize as a warning sign. "I see. And what specifically did Ms. Rodriguez do that was unprofessional?" "She recommended an overpriced wine, served overcooked salmon, and then had the audacity to lecture me when I expressed my dissatisfaction. I've been a member here for 2 years, and I've never experienced such disrespectful treatment." David Kim shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting between Marcus and Elizabeth. As the senior vice president of marketing, he had learned to read room dynamics with the skill of a meteorologist tracking storm systems. The pressure in this room was dropping rapidly, and he could sense the approaching tempest. Elizabeth's smile was colder than winter fog rolling in from the Pacific. "Mr. Wellington, I've reviewed the wine recommendation in question. Ms. Rodriguez suggested the Chateau Margaux 2015, which happens to be one of our most exceptional selections and pairs perfectly with our salmon preparation. As for the salmon itself, it was prepared to medium rare exactly as you ordered by a chef with 15 years of experience at Michelin-starred restaurants." "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm stating facts, evenly. But let's discuss what really concerns me. According to the staff members who witnessed your interaction with Ms. Rodriguez, you made several comments that crossed the line from customer feedback into personal attack. You questioned her intelligence, made assumptions about her character, and used language that could reasonably be interpreted as discriminatory." The word discriminatory hung in the air like incense, heavy and impossible to ignore. Other diners were no longer pretending to focus on their meals. The drama at Table 7 had become the afternoon's entertainment, though none of them would admit to eavesdropping. Sarah Chen, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the hushed dining room, every word carried clearly. "Mr. Wellington, perhaps we should discuss this privately. This isn't really the appropriate venue for—" "Don't tell me what's appropriate," Marcus snapped, turning his fury on his subordinate. "I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I don't need to justify my expectations for quality service to anyone, especially not to—" He caught himself before finishing the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Elizabeth's expression hardened into something that could have cut glass. "Especially not to what, Mr. Wellington? Please finish your thought. I'm very interested to hear what you were about to say." Marcus realized too late that he had walked into a trap of his own making.
His mouth opened and closed silently as he struggled for words that wouldn't make his situation worse. The silence stretched on, punctuated only by the distant clatter of plates from the kitchen and the muffled conversations of diners who were trying to appear uninvolved while hanging on every word. From her position near the kitchen, Maya watched the confrontation unfold with a mixture of anxiety and amazement. She had seen Elizabeth handle difficult situations before, but never with this level of cold fury. Elizabeth's legendary composure was legendary among the staff. She could defuse any situation with grace and diplomacy. But Maya had never seen her truly angry until now. Janet Martinez appeared at Maya's elbow, her face creased with concern. "Mija, you okay? Carlos told me what happened. That man has no right to speak to you that way. But Elizabeth being here, I don't know if that makes things better or worse for you." Maya nodded slowly, unable to trust her voice. She thought of Elena at home, depending on Maya's income for her medications and medical appointments. She thought of her law school applications, still pending, her future hanging in the balance of acceptance letters and financial aid packages. She thought of her co-workers, who needed their jobs just as desperately as she needed hers. Had her moment of spine caused not just her own future, but potentially their livelihoods as well? Meanwhile, at table 7, Elizabeth was just getting started. "Mr. Wellington, let me share some information that might interest you. Miss Rodriguez has been employed here for 3 years without a single customer complaint. She maintains a 3.8 GPA while working 50 hours a week and caring for her elderly grandmother. She's been accepted to law school and plans to specialize in employment law. She speaks 3 languages fluently and has completed advanced coursework in hospitality management. She is, by any objective measure, exactly the kind of employee that makes the Grandview Executive Club exceptional." Marcus's jaw tightened with each revelation about Maya's qualifications and achievements. The picture Elizabeth painted contradicted everything he had assumed about the young woman he had dismissed as an insignificant obstacle to his lunch plans. "Furthermore," Elizabeth continued, her voice gaining momentum like a gathering storm, "she recommended that wine because she has studied our wine list extensively and understood your preferences based on your previous visits. She prepared your table with the attention to detail that our members expect. And when you chose to attack her character rather than address any legitimate service issues, she maintained her professionalism while standing up for herself with dignity and grace." David Kim was frantically texting someone under the table, likely his assistant, warning her to clear his afternoon schedule because this lunch was going to last much longer than anticipated. Sarah Chen had given up any pretense of eating and was staring at her plate as if it might provide answers to questions she didn't dare ask aloud. Elizabeth wasn't finished with her lesson in consequences. "Mr. Wellington, I think it's time you understood exactly who you've been speaking to today. Miss Rodriguez isn't just any server. She's been selected as our employee liaison for the Grandview Hospitality Group's new Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. She'll be working directly with management to develop policies that ensure every employee is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their position or background." This transformation didn't happen overnight. It took years of Maya's dedication and courage. If you're finding value in her journey, please take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss the powerful conclusion of her story. This was news to Maya, who felt her eyes widen in surprise. She hadn't heard anything about a diversity initiative, let alone being selected for any special role. But Elizabeth's slight nod in her direction suggested that if such a position hadn't existed before today, it would by tomorrow. Marcus's face had gone pale, the implications of Elizabeth's words hitting him like a series of body blows.
He was no longer just dealing with an angry restaurant owner. He was potentially facing a discrimination complaint that could destroy his career and his company's reputation. "Elizabeth, surely we can work this out like reasonable business people," Marcus said, his voice taking on the pleading tone of a man who suddenly understood how much he had to lose. "I'm willing to apologize, to make this right. There's no need to escalate this further."
Elizabeth's smile was as sharp as a blade. "Oh, Mr. Wellington, you misunderstood. This isn't a negotiation. This is a lesson in consequences." She turned to address the entire dining room, her voice carrying clearly to every table. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to your meal. At the Grandview Executive Club, we pride ourselves on creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and professional courtesy. When someone violates those standards, whether they're a staff member or a guest, we address it immediately and decisively." Every eye in the dining room was focused on Elizabeth now, the power dynamics shifting visibly as she took control of the narrative. Maya realized she was witnessing a master class in leadership, watching Elizabeth transform a moment of crisis into a teaching opportunity that would resonate far beyond the walls of the dining room. "Mr. Wellington," Elizabeth continued, turning back to table 7. "I'm afraid your membership at the Grandview Executive Club is hereby terminated, effective immediately. You'll receive a full refund for the remainder of this year's dues, minus the cost of today's meal and any damages to our reputation that may result from your behavior." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Membership at the Grandview wasn't just about fine dining. It was a symbol of status, a networking opportunity that was essential to his business relationships. Being banned from the club would send a message throughout the Bay Area business community that Marcus Wellington III was not someone to be trusted or respected. "You can't do this," Marcus protested, his voice cracking with desperation. "I have contracts pending, deals that depend on my relationships here. This will destroy me professionally." Elizabeth's expression didn't soften. "Mr. Wellington, what you call one bad day, I call a revelation of character. This wasn't an anomaly, it was a window into who you really are when you think no one important is watching." She gestured toward Maya, who still stood frozen near the service station, unsure whether to approach or retreat. "Ms. Rodriguez, would you please join us? I believe Mr. Wellington has something he'd like to say to you." Maya's legs felt like they were moving through molasses as she crossed the dining room. Every step brought her closer to the epicenter of a confrontation that would ripple through both of their lives for years to come. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, the silent judgment and curiosity of people who moved in circles she could barely imagine. When Maya reached table 7, Marcus looked up at her with eyes that held a mixture of desperation and resentment. His carefully styled hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, and sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, despite the dining room's perfect climate control. I apologize for my behavior," Marcus said, the words seeming to scrape his throat raw. "I was having a stressful day, and I took it out on you unfairly. That was wrong of me."
Maya studied his face, searching for genuine remorse, but finding only the calculated contrition of someone who had been backed into a corner. She had heard apologies like this before, from classmates who bullied her in middle school, from supervisors who tried to walk back inappropriate comments, from customers who realized their behavior might have consequences. They weren't apologies, they were attempted escapes. "Thank you for saying that," Maya replied carefully, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "But I think both of us know that this isn't really about one stressful day or one moment of poor judgment." Elizabeth View-Chen nodded approvingly at Maya's response, while David Kim and Sarah Chan looked increasingly uncomfortable with their front-row seats to their boss's humiliation. The security guards remained positioned nearby, patient but unmovable,
like well-dressed mountains waiting for their cue. Marcus's facade cracked further. "Look, I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? I'm a successful businessman. I employ hundreds of people, and I contribute to this community. I made a mistake, but that doesn't erase everything I've accomplished." Maya felt something shift inside her, a clarity that cut through the confusion and fear that had clouded her thoughts since the confrontation began. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw not the powerful CEO who had intimidated her, but a frightened man who had built his sense of worth on the foundation of other people's diminishment. 3 years later, the California Supreme Court building in San Francisco stood like a temple to justice against the morning sky, its classical columns and soaring architecture a testament to the ideals that Maya Rodriguez had spent the last 3 years learning to wield as weapons against inequality. She climbed the marble steps with the confident stride of someone who belonged here, her tailored navy suit a far cry from the white uniform shirt she had worn during her final shift at the Grandview Executive Club. Maya Rodriguez Esquire had graduated summa cum laude from Berkeley Law School, passed the California bar exam on her first attempt, and immediately joined the Bay Area Workers' Rights Legal Clinic as a staff attorney. Today, she was arguing her first case before the state's highest court, Carmen Vasquez v. Grandview Hotels International, the case that had begun as a simple wrongful termination claim and had evolved into a landmark challenge to how California law addressed retaliation against immigrant workers who reported workplace discrimination. Elena Rodriguez sat in the gallery, her silver hair pinned back in an elegant chignon that Maya had helped her perfect that morning. At 78, Elena moved with the careful dignity of someone whose body bore the marks of decades of physical labor, but whose spirit remained unbroken. She wore her best dress, navy blue with small flowers, and the pearl earrings that Maya had given her for her birthday, purchased with money from Maya's first legal fellowship. The courtroom was packed with observers who understood the significance of the case. Representatives from immigrant rights organizations sat next to labor union leaders and civil rights attorneys. Law professors had brought their students to witness oral arguments that could reshape employment law in California. And in the back row, partially hidden behind a pillar, Elizabeth View-Chen watched with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had chosen the right side of history. Maya's opponent was Harrison & Associates, one of California's most prestigious corporate law firms representing Grandview Hotels International in their appeal of a $2.3 million judgment. The hotel chain had hoped to overturn the lower court's finding that their treatment of Carmen Vasquez violated both state and federal anti-retaliation statutes. They had hired the best legal talent money could buy, expecting to overwhelm a young attorney from a small legal clinic. They had not anticipated Maya Rodriguez. "Your Honors," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the high-ceilinged chamber. "This case is about power, who has it, who abuses it, and what happens when the law fails to protect those who dare to challenge that abuse." She had learned to harness her natural speaking ability during 3 years of moot court competitions, summer fellowships, and legal clinics. But her strength as an advocate came from something deeper, the lived experience of being dismissed, underestimated, and ultimately vindicated by people who had initially written her off. Carmen Vasquez sat in the front row, her 3 children flanked by their father who had taken time off from his construction job to witness this moment. Carmen had risked everything to file her complaint against Grandview Hotels, facing threats of deportation and economic retaliation. Her courage had not only secured justice for herself, but had opened the door for dozens of other workers who had suffered in silence. Maya's argument was brilliant in its simplicity and devastating in its logic. She drew parallels between Carmen's case and the broader pattern of employer retaliation against vulnerable workers, citing statistics that showed how fear of immigration enforcement was being weaponized to suppress labor complaints. She referenced academic studies, federal guidelines, and legal precedents, but she grounded her argument in the human reality of what happened when workers were denied basic protections. The defense argues that Ms. Vasquez was terminated for legitimate business reasons, Maya continued, her eyes meeting those of each justice in turn. But the evidence shows a pattern of harassment that was ignored by management until Ms. Vasquez filed a formal complaint. Within 48 hours of that complaint, she was terminated for alleged performance issues that had never been documented in her 8 years of employment.
Maya had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, working with her colleagues at the legal clinic to anticipate every argument the defense might raise. But she had also spent time with Carmen and her family, understanding not just the legal issues, but the human cost of the discrimination they had endured. The defense attorney, a silver-haired partner from Harrison and Associates, who had argued dozens of cases before the Supreme Court, presented a polished argument about the complexity of employment decisions and the need to protect businesses from frivolous lawsuits. His suit probably cost more than Maya made in a month, and his confidence reflected decades of victories in similar cases. But Maya had something he lacked: credibility born from authentic experience. When she rose for her rebuttal, she carried with her not just legal expertise, but moral authority. "Your Honors," Maya said, "the defense would have you believe that this case is about protecting legitimate business interests from unreasonable legal liability. But this case is really about whether California will continue to allow employers to silence workers through fear and economic intimidation." Her voice grew stronger as she continued, drawing on the passion that had sustained her through law school and her early career. Carmen Vasquez didn't file her complaint lightly. She knew the risks to her job, her family's financial security, and even her immigration status. She came forward because she believed that the law would protect her right to work in an environment free from sexual harassment. We cannot allow employers to prove her wrong. The justices asked pointed questions about precedent, about the balance between worker protection and business flexibility, about the practical implications of their potential ruling. Maya answered each query with the thorough preparation of an excellent legal mind and the conviction of someone who had lived the experiences she was advocating for. When the arguments concluded, Maya felt the satisfaction of knowing she had given Carmen's case everything she had to offer. The justices would deliberate for months before issuing their ruling, but Maya had planted seeds that could grow into protections for thousands of workers across California. As the courtroom emptied, Elena approached her granddaughter with tears in her eyes and pride radiating from every line of her weathered face. "Mija, I understood maybe half of what you said in there, but I understood everything about how you said it. You spoke with the voice of our people, but you spoke in the language of power." Maya embraced her grandmother, feeling the familiar comfort of Elena's arms around her. "I learned how to fight from you, Abuela. You taught me that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. It's something you carry inside, no matter what work you do or how people try to make you feel small." Elizabeth View-Chen approached them as they stood in the courthouse hallway, her expression reflecting the same pride that Elena wore. "Maya, that was extraordinary. I've watched a lot of legal arguments over the years, but I've never seen someone argue with such passion and precision simultaneously." The three women, representing three different generations and backgrounds, but united by their shared commitment to justice, stood together in the marble hallway while reporters and legal observers filed past. Elizabeth had driven down from Marin County specifically to witness Maya's Supreme Court debut, continuing a relationship that had evolved from employer-employee to mentor-protégé to something approaching friendship. Carmen Vasquez joined them, her children clustering around her with the nervous energy of young people in an unfamiliar environment. "Ms. Rodriguez, I don't have words to thank you. Win or lose, you made them listen to me. You made them see me as a person who deserved respect."
Maya knelt to Carmen's eye level, taking her hands just as she had learned to do with Elena during her grandmother's most difficult medical appointments. "Carmen, you're the one who had the courage to come forward when it would have been safer to stay silent. I just helped translate your courage into language the law could understand." 5 years later, the glass and steel office building in downtown Oakland bore a modest sign: Rodriguez and Associates, Workers' Rights Attorneys. Maya had chosen the location deliberately, close enough to San Francisco's financial district to be taken seriously by corporate defendants, but rooted in the community where she had grown up and where many of her clients still lived. The Carmen Vasquez case had resulted in a unanimous Supreme Court ruling that strengthened protections for immigrant workers who reported workplace discrimination. The decision had been cited in dozens of subsequent cases across the country, creating legal precedent that would protect thousands of workers from retaliation. Maya's name was now attached to a landmark ruling that would outlive her by decades.
Maya had turned them all down to start her own practice, focusing exclusively on employment discrimination and workers' rights cases. Rodriguez and Associates had grown from Maya working alone in a shared office space to a firm with 8 attorneys, 4 paralegals, and a client base that included everyone from hotel housekeepers to tech company employees who had been blacklisted for organizing unions. Elena had lived to see Maya argue 3 more cases before the California Supreme Court, winning 2 and establishing legal precedent that continued to protect vulnerable workers. She had died peacefully in her sleep at age 81, surrounded by Maya and the extended family of neighbors and friends who had become part of their chosen clan over the years. At Elena's funeral, Maya had been amazed by the number of people who shared stories of how Elena had helped them navigate immigration paperwork, healthcare bureaucracy, or educational applications. Elena Rodriguez had never earned a law degree or held a professional title, but she had spent her life advocating for others with the same fierce dedication that had inspired Maya's career. Maya kept Elena's photograph on her office desk, next to her law school diploma and the framed copy of the Supreme Court's decision in Vasquez versus Grandview Hotels. She would often look at that photograph during difficult cases, drawing strength from Elena's example of quiet determination and unshakable dignity. 7 years later, the federal courthouse in San Francisco had become as familiar to Maya as the community center where Elena used to volunteer. She was arguing her 15th case before a federal appeals court representing a class of agricultural workers who had been denied overtime pay and subjected to unsafe working conditions. At 32, Maya Rodriguez had become one of the most respected employment attorneys on the West Coast. The opposing counsel represented a multinational agribusiness corporation with annual revenues in the billions. They had hired a team of attorneys from 3 different law firms, spending more on legal fees in a single month than Maya's firm generated in revenue all year. But Maya had something that money couldn't buy: credibility with juries and judges who recognized her authentic commitment to justice. Her closing argument drew on everything she had learned during 15 years of fighting for workers' rights, but it was grounded in the lessons Elena had taught her during their quiet conversations in their East Oakland apartment. "Your Honor, the defendants would have you believe that these workers are asking for special treatment, for benefits beyond what they've earned. But they're asking for something much simpler. They're asking to be treated like human beings, whose labor has value and whose safety matters." Maya's personal life had found its own balance over the years. She had married James Patterson, her study group partner from law school, whose family wealth had initially made her suspicious, but whose genuine commitment to social justice had won her respect. James had used his trust fund to help finance Maya's law firm during its early years, and he now works as a public defender, representing clients who couldn't afford private attorneys. Their 2 children, Elena Esperanza Rodriguez Patterson, age 4, and Marcus Justice Rodriguez Patterson, age 2, were being raised bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable in Oakland's community centers and Marin County's benefit galas.
Maya had chosen Marcus's name deliberately, not to honor the man who tried to humiliate her, but to reclaim it as a symbol of justice rather than arrogance. 10 years later. The University of California at Berkeley Law School's moot court was packed with first-year students who had come to hear Maya Rodriguez deliver the annual Elena Rodriguez Memorial Lecture on Social Justice and Legal Advocacy. The lecture series had been endowed by Maya and James with additional funding from Elizabeth view-Chen to bring practitioners to campus who could share real-world experience with students planning careers in public interest law. Maya stood at the podium where Dr. Patricia Williamson had once challenged her to think beyond the boundaries of traditional legal practice. Dr. Williamson had retired 5 years earlier, but she sat in the front row with the satisfaction of a mentor watching her protégé inspire the next generation of advocates. 10 years ago, Maya began, I was standing in a dining room being told by a powerful man that I would never be anything more than a waitress, that I didn't know my place, that people like me always looked for the easy way out. The students leaned forward, recognizing the story that had become legend in the Bay Area's legal community. Many of them had read about the Grandview incident in their application essays, citing Maya's courage as inspiration for their own decisions to pursue law school. That man was wrong about my limitations, but he was right about one thing. I didn't know my place. I thought my place was to accept disrespect in silence, to be grateful for whatever opportunities I was given, to make myself small so that others could feel powerful. She paused, scanning the diverse faces in the audience, students from backgrounds similar to her own, mixed with others whose privilege could be leveraged for positive change. I learned that day that my place, that all of our places, is wherever we choose to stand up for dignity, justice, and the fundamental worth of every human being.
Maya's lecture covered the technical aspects of employment law, but it was really about character, courage,